Alright, today I'm going to be sharpening up one of my kitchen knives. This is a Tojiro DP VG10. I think at Rockwell's around 60 or so. I've had a few of these over the years. Well, this is my third one. The last one I bought broke the tip off. I had I'd used it quite a bit, thinned it out, and just ended up chucking it and getting a new one. I got this from Chef Knives I got this from Amazon. The last one I got from Chef Knives to go, but I think it's $75 or $70, somewhere around there. Overall, they sharpen quick. The heat treat seems to be good on it. The edge seems to hold an edge fairly well, as long as you're cutting on a good cutting board or something. If you're cutting on your countertop, something along those lines, not so well. But I'm starting off on a Shapton. It says Shapton Pro 1000 grit. Generally, I don't really tend to drag the edge through. Kill the edge or distress it. I've done lots of tests on my own, and for me, it just does. I don't seem to get any better results as far as the edge quality or edge retention or anything like that. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with it if you want to do it. But if you're starting on a stone that's going to grind away enough steel, I don't really think there's any benefit to it. But the edge on this is, doesn't have any damage. There's no chips or anything like that, so definitely has a burr. Got a burr down to about here, back here not feeling a whole lot, so. Okay, got a burr worked up. Now if you can pick that up or not, you can hear this catching the burr and dragging. Get a piece of or a sheet of paper towel here, and I'll do a slice through it, cut test, and it should hang up pretty good. It's pretty sufficient. It's not a real big burr, but big enough where it's not going to cut paper towel cleanly. I'd be surprised if it did. Yeah, doesn't want to cut it at all. right here. These little white spots, that's my fingernail catching on the burr. Okay, now what I'm going to do is go to a Naniwa Professional, or the Chosera, basically the same thing. I haven't cleaned this for a bit, but it should still be level enough. This is 3K. Really a good stone. You see on this stone, this is not a soaking stone, but you put water on there, it kind of tends to concentrate towards the middle and pull away from the edges. If you take, if you see that, you can take a little bit of water, not even a drop, just the tiniest amount of dish soap, excuse me, put it in water, and that soap will kind of help break that surface tension, and it won't do that. The thing too is if you put too much soap in the water, it gets a real slimy feel in your hands that are kind of slipping and sliding all over the blade, and bad things can happen. So, but yeah, just a tiny amount of dish soap, or really any soap for that matter, will help stop the water from pooling like that. This is just straight water, so that's why you see it doing that a little bit. I'm not using very much pressure, just the slightest amount. And as I go on, I'll just keep lightening it up. Now all I'm going to do is, I've apexed it, each stone, both sides, and what I'm going to do is, instead of finishing on this stone and maybe going to a strop or maybe bare leather or something, I'm going to go to something a little bit different. It's one I use on my European kitchen knives, my German kitchen knives, and not so much my Japanese kitchen knives, because a lot of them are over 60 Rockwell, and I don't think it works as well, but this one's kind of right on the threshold where I think I can use it and it'll still work well. Like Global's Wusthoffs or anything like that, the stone I'm going to use works fantastic. Start getting up into Japanese knives, kitchen knives that have 64, 65 Rockwell or something, it doesn't work as well, but I think it'll work well with this. So. This is just a stone from the Natural Whetstone Company. I got this thing. It was pretty rough. I don't even think it was usable. I hate to badmouth the company. I'm not doing that. At least I'm not trying to. But when I got it, I don't even think it was usable. It took me about 3 hours of leveling and lapping, doing a light burnishing to get it where I want. But with that being said, now that I have it where I want, it produces fantastic results. And something like this, I think the specific gravity on this, I think I figured it was around 2.45, really dense. It's unlike the regular, the water stones I was just using. You don't have to really ever reflatten this. It's just not going to dish. Occasionally you got to resurface it, just because the abrasives in the stone, the natural abrasives, kind of wear down over time. Don't cut as well, so I might have to do that once or twice a year if you use it a lot. So. And I can tell just by, I've sharpened a lot of knives over the years and lots of different stones, and I can just tell kind of right away if it's just not liking it, or if I think it'll produce a good edge. And I'm pretty sure this will produce a good edge. It feels like it, so. Now, I normally sharpen right-handed. For a few years I sharpened ambidextrously, right and left, so I figured I'd try something different. I really think it's, for the money, it's hard to beat these. I mean, it's just a really good kitchen knife. I know a lot of, I've read in forums and whatnot, and comments, people that are prep cooks, line cooks, even chefs, use these quite often, so. In a professional setting. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slow things down a bit, shorten up the strokes, and for me, I find that gives me a better edge overall, better accuracy when I slow it down towards the end. Like I said, shorten up the strokes or the passes. I'm using just the weight of the blade. Try not to use any downward force at all. Just nice light scrubbing passes. I'm trying to do is just fatigue that burr, work it back and forth to the point where it wants to just kind of come off on its own. Something like this, or maybe you got a blade and half 40 or one of the good Hitachi steels. Burrs generally tend to kind of fall off much easier than if you've got a really cheap, budget stamped stainless that you bought off Amazon for 25 bucks. Those can be a real bear to work with sometimes, but I can feel burr breaking off already. I don't know if you can pick it up or not, but you can hear that kind of a crunchy. There's some remnants on the stone, and the stone is so dense. You can really feel it and hear it. I don't think there's enough on there to damage the edge per se, but hunks of burr that come off, but there's definitely burr remnants on there. Definitely sharpness is picking up. Now I'm going to drag it through my thumbnail. If you see my thumbnail kind of twitching back and forth, there's quite a bit of burr left, or a fair amount. If it's nice and smooth, my thumb doesn't move, normally it's a pretty good sign that it doesn't have much burr left, so that's a pretty good sign. Another nice thing about using a stone like this, if you want to, you can finish, edge leading. If you're on a stone that produces a slurry, or it's very soft, you can run into problems for varying reasons. If you're doing edge leading on this, not so much. It tends to work really well. It doesn't produce any slurry, abrasives not released. It's just a very dense stone. So. Now I'm going to try and sharpen exactly the angle I've been sharpening at. If you want, you can add a little bit of elevation, put a little micro burr on there. I don't think it's necessary in my case. But now, when you're going to set the angle, a little trick you can do, especially if there's any kind of soap in there, it will generate bubbles. Lay your blade flat, and then pick it up. As soon as you start to see a little bubble on the edge, that tells you you're pretty much at the correct angle. And it's particularly helpful if you're sharpening on this side and you really can't see the apex contacting the stone, so give you a pretty good idea of the correct angle. Also, when I'm sharpening, as I start to make the pass, I'll start to lift up a little bit until I feel it bite into the stone, and I'll stop. Don't want to go too far, you're going to run into problems. And generally, after this, it puts an edge on most of my knives, my kitchen knives. It's so sharp it'll just top hair, free hanging. I mean, it's very, very keen edge. When you're sharpening on a stone that releases abrasives, if you look under like a microscope, very, very close up, you can see two things. You can see burr fragments. You can also see things like little bits of abrasive in there. So normally when you strop, it removes that. Well, this tends to remove that, so you really don't need a strop. It cleans the edge up very nicely. So. It leaves kind of a semi-mirrored polish, but very toothy and aggressive, but it's still very refined. It's all of this. I've got a lot of natural stones, a lot of man-made synthetic stones, and none of them seem to produce an edge quite like this. I don't know why. Now, I'm really starting to lighten up on the pressure. I mean, just enough to control the angle. any less, then I would lose control of the angle. And that's extremely sharp feeling right there. I mean, that is really sharp. Let me go to my vacuum and see if I can get a hair. I don't know if it's quite hair whittling or not, but it's probably pretty close. Now, when it comes to your kitchen knife, this is probably a little too refined. You know, if you're getting it to basically top and whittle hairs, you've probably gone a little too far, but this is just to give you an idea how sharp you can get an edge right off of the stone. I don't know if you can see that or not, but you can see that it just pops the hair right in half. Very sharp. And like I said, you know, for the most part, getting it to whittle hairs, you know, normally most people are going to be stropping it a bunch, and they're going to be stropping it to a point where they're kind of over polishing it, removing any kind of bite. That's one of the nice things about this, is this thing still has a lot of bite, but it's very refined. It's kind of the best of both worlds, I guess you could say. And for just general food prep, you know, seems to work really well, hold up fairly well. I, you know, do all my cutting on a hardwood ingrained cutting boards that I make. But and it's very quiet. If the edge is not really that, oh, it's still wet. If an edge is really not that refined, you can really hear it when you're cutting paper. This is just very, very quiet. Anyways, if you're into sharpening your own kitchen knives, and you're looking for a good stone, something like a black Arkansas, even a translucent, they work really well for sharpening your kitchen knives. You don't see too many people using them, unfortunately, but and you can see it's very sharp right off the stone, no stropping. Leaves a pretty decent, you know, mirror edge on there. My sharpening skills are not the best, so my edge is not perfect. But yeah, it works well overall, and you know, thank you for watching. If you got any questions or comments, you know, feel free to leave them below.